Welcome to The Grand Balance, a weekly podcast hosted by two working grandmas navigating the beautiful chaos of work and family. In today's episode, we will discuss the challenges of juggling different expectations of multiple sets of grandparents wanting to spend time with their grandchildren. We hope to offer some valuable insights and tips to ensure grandchildren are given the ability to have positive attachments to all of their grandparents.
Well, Sharon, I love this topic because we have grandparents in San Diego, California, and then the other set of grandparents are in Buffalo, New York. So completely opposite ends of the country. And I have to say, I feel really blessed. We've got so far some great relationships. And I don't know if it is because we are so far and we only see each other like during celebratory moments. But I know there could be conflicts with other grandparents who may have to battle more for time.
Right. Even if you're the best of friends, I feel like time, especially trying to juggle time during the holidays, can be a stressful situation in many families.
My grandson will be turning 1 this year, and we had the kids last year when he was just a couple months old. And now this year, we will not have the grandson during Christmas. So that's going to be a huge disappointment for me because Christmas is my holiday. I kind of go all out for that. But I have to just remember that I'm very fortunate that I get to see the baby twice a week, whereas the other grandparents, it's just a few times per year. So I can't even think about being jealous that they get, to share the holidays every other year.
Right. You're taking turns for sure. And keep reminding yourself, your grandson is able to have all that love throughout the entire country on both coasts.
I know. Well, and that, as we mentioned before, that is the benefit of technology, is the FaceTime and opportunities to stay connected every single day if you really wanted to.
Yeah, that's true. What a difference. That's one of the main advantages I can see to technology. We've talked about so many cons, but what a great situation that when you are far away, the grandchildren can still see your face. You can talk back and forth, a lot different than back in the day when it was just over the telephone, only hearing audio.
Right. They can see expressions, and grandparents can call them. They can call grandparents. They can share, things that happen in the day as they get older. That is the one thing about technology that makes me feel better. And I know your daughter may be moving, so I'm sure you'll be taking advantage of that at some point.
Right. Yeah, that'll be a whole big change for us. I can't imagine a holiday that I wouldn't fly to wherever they were. But again, I'm not juggling different sides of families either. It's just really myself and our immediate family that we need to travel with. So it's less complicated the fewer people, I think.
So what is interesting is, as I was preparing for this episode, I was reading up on, trying not to play favorites, but it's natural, and studies have shown for the maternal grandmother to actually spend more time with the baby or with their grandchildren than on the paternal side. And there's been studies about it, and it's called the matrilineal advantage. And basically, the mother-daughter dyads engage in more frequent phone contact. The daughter wants more emotional support. They're going to go to their own mother more so than, let's say, the mother-in-laws. And then they also plan for activities to keep the family going. Researchers call it kin keeping. So they're the ones arranging for the calls and the visits and sharing family news and planning holiday gatherings. So women, they're more active in maintaining those relationships. And that's where mothers and daughters tend to spend more time together. So naturally, the grandmother of the mother would spend more time with the grandchildren.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, but I didn't realize it was a full-blown study with names and so forth to the relationship. Because it does make sense. Let's face it, generally, females are better communicators. And it is true, the female usually is the one making the social plans for the family and staying organized that way. So it makes sense, but I didn't really realize it was something that had been studied.
Right. And it says it's from like years and years ago. This is always how it's been like throughout history. But of course, there are exceptions based on the relationship of the mother and daughter. If that is strained, obviously that isn't going to be the same situation for everybody. But historically, that's how it's been done. So I guess I should feel fortunate that my first grandson is my daughter's
Yeah, I was
son.
thinking the same thing. We're both lucky it was our daughters, because I have thought and I have heard stressful stories of families of sons where the grandparents don't get to see the child as much because the mom is in charge.
And the husbands want to support their wives.
Right.
So they're not going to create conflict in their own home.
Yeah, it makes sense. But we both are lucky, I guess, that our first grandchildren are by our daughters, because we will have to report back when the time comes and our sons are in the situation where they're having children and what kind of differences we do see.
Right. Or have people call in and tell us, and maybe we can report on it in a future episode, because we are brand new grandmothers, and both of which are to our daughter's first grandchild,
right,
or first child. So
grandparents that have their sons' children, that's who we need to hear from. Different viewpoints on that, because I feel like it can be all over the board.
That's right. And when that happens, because both of our second-borns are sons, so we should expect that will happen at some point. I think it's really important to understand how to keep the peace amongst the various grandparents.
And minimize stress.
So I was reading this article, and they basically had 4 main tips, but their main point of emphasis was that grandkids have room in their hearts for secure attachments to all of their grandparents. So don't be jealous. Don't try to dominate, because your grandbaby will give you as much love as they're giving their other grandparents.
I think that's a good reminder too, because we have talked about it in another episode, but children have the capacity to love so many. And I feel like the more loving influences they have in their life, the better off they are.
So the first tip in this article is to remember that you're all on the same team. And the relationship with the other grandparents, they said, can be very much like sibling rivalry, where from the time that the baby is born, the 2 sets of grandparents may quietly be competing for time.
Are they fighting like siblings?
Yes, they're competing for time. And I remember when my son was born, the youngest, my daughter, who was 4 at the time, we couldn't take a picture with the baby without her putting her head in. Like, me too,
That's
don't
so
leave
funny.
me out, right? And so the same thing can happen with grandparents, where, well, if they get to spend this much time, I want to spend that much time. So remembering you're all on the same page and just putting the grandchildren first, to know that they need to see that everybody loves and cares for each other. And the mother-in-laws, based on what we were just talking about, also needs to understand the mother and daughter relationship is a pretty powerful one. And so not to fret too much about that, but just let that naturally take place.
You know, another thing too, to remind yourself as a grandparent, is the grandparents are so different. And I think it's so beneficial to grandkids to have different experiences with different personalities. Because every family has different traditions. Every family has different ways they do things, communicate, have fun. I think it's really great for the grandchildren to see all kinds of different scenarios play out like that.
For example, I am never going to compete with the other grandmother's Italian cooking. So that is her thing. They get to do that. You know, that's special that will be special, I'm sure, at some point when he starts eating the food. And I think he got it recently on a visit.
Especially a boy.
Oh, he is going to always talk about his grandma's cooking, I'm sure. And it's not going to be mine, because I'm not a good cook. The second tip was live and let live. And the point behind this is that the other grandparents are as old as you are, and you're not going to change them. We are, as we get older, we are stuck in our ways. So don't try to change the way they may grandparent.
I think that would cause some bad feelings as well.
You know, it's not necessary to be friends with your in-laws, but you have to take your ego out of it. And then
I think you have to be friendly, though.
yes,
sure.
absolutely. You have to respect them. If there are things that you don't like that they might be doing or doing differently, you just have to let it go. Live and let live. Practice your zip-it-ability.
Exactly. Perfect opportunity.
The third tip was keep holidays conflict-free. And this is a big one for us, as I mentioned earlier, because I'm only going to see my grandchildren every other year now. Okay, fine. I don't want to make the holidays stressful. Both sets of grandparents lived in town. My kids' grandparents lived in town. And I can tell you, we were running ragged on the holidays. We'd go to the great-grandparents, then we go to the grandparents, then we'd hop on over to the other grandparents. Then the next day we would do the same thing. And we were tired. It wasn't fun for the kids because we were trying to make it so fair for all the grandparents. We were putting their needs in front of the needs of the children and their celebration of the holiday and letting them spend time at home with their toys and stuff like that. And so the last thing that you want to do is make it stressful for the kids or the grandkids just to get that extra time because you want to have your time with them on the holidays.
Right. Have you thought about on the off years, are you planning on doing like a faux Christmas before they leave?
We will probably celebrate 2 days before, open gifts, things like that. Or maybe when they come back. We really haven't talked about it yet. But I have to think about ways to make it special because yes, they're spending the time with their other grandparents in person. I still want to make for us Christmas special for the grandson just because that's also my favorite holiday. So I want him to know grandma is that. Like she loves Christmas.
Right. And I think like myself, I want to establish traditions that we can carry on year after year with the grandkids. I know families in the service fields or different jobs that can't get off. Christmas falls on December 20th, or they just kind of move the days around. And kids, don't know the exact day that Christmas is supposed to be on. So in your case, if they have 2 celebrations, all the better.
Right. And even if they do know that this is the official day, like you said, they're like, yeah, we get 2 parties. We get 2 celebrations.
Right. So my concentration will be trying to start new traditions with the grandkids and carry on some of the ones that my mom and my grandmother started as well.
What were some of those?
Some of the traditions we always did, we always had a Christmas brunch, Christmas morning brunch, and it's always with the same exact foods. So I would like to carry that on. My kids are very used to that. I think some of them you do have to be flexible because in our family, we've always done gifts Christmas morning, and that might be somewhat area you have to be flexible in if you have to start switching off Christmas Eves to Christmas days or things like that. Christmas ornaments, I think we've talked about it, but we've always collected them from all over. So it's always fun to do the tree with the grandkids and go over where you found the ornaments and different things that happen throughout their lives. Are there any traditions you guys have done?
Well, just having Christmas Eve at our house with the extended family is always fun. We always do the saran wrap game with all the
we do that
toys,
as well.
or, all the gifts in there. Oh, that's very fun. I'll probably never stop doing that, even though it's like crazy little gifts that everybody has a good time with that. And then usually one other game. So we play a couple games, Christmas Eve. Christmas Day, I'd mentioned it was very chaotic for our family to go back and forth. So we finally put a stop to it and we decided, okay, we're going to go in the morning after the kids, get to open their gifts and get settled. We're going to head over to the other grandparents' house for just a few minutes, but then leave. And the rest, we'll go to either a Christmas movie or we'll order in and watch a movie. And that's just to relax because it's been such a stressful time with the holidays preparing for it. It just gives everyone time to be together, but in a very relaxed environment.
Yeah, our family has done the movie on Christmas as well. And it's fun just to all be together and enjoy each other.
One of the things you had mentioned is sharing, Christmas morning. So an idea I was thinking of, and I'd love to hear how others feel about this, is maybe just shipping one gift or just a couple of little gifts to the grandparents' house, the other grandparents' house, and just trying to get on video so you can, wake up in the morning and maybe they give you a little bit of time and the kids can open the gifts from the grandparents. Just to say, hey, we're still involved with you, but it's not really impeding on the other grandparent time if it's only like 15 minutes. And then the last tip was stay close if you're the distant grandparent. And like we said, we're very fortunate. We're not the distant grandparent, but making sure you find ways to stay connected. And I know, Sharon, you had a couple of tips to do that.
I've been thinking a lot about this since more than likely my grandchild will be many thousands of miles away. So a couple things I've thought of, and my mom was always a long distance grandma, although she did come every month. So she did a couple really cute things. She would send a gift full of like a little box full for each of the kids every month. And for my daughters, she had grandchild extraordinaire written on the label. So it was always the exact same label that came. And for my son, her grandson, it said primo grandson. So they knew as soon as they saw those labels, it was some special little thing from grandma. So,
I love that. And it's once a month?
It was once a month, about more or less.
Yeah.
Sometimes when they were younger, it was probably a little more often. And I even saved some of those labels because I thought, what a great memory that was.
Do they remember that?
They both do.
Yeah.
Because it went on for years as well. So she would stay in touch enough too to know what they were into, what they wanted, what they enjoyed. So it was always a special surprise and they were always super, super excited about it. Another idea we had to stay in touch was when our guest Laura Young Shahada came on, she had mentioned she was a pen pal with one or more of her grandchildren. And my mom had done that as well with my daughter. And I think that's great once kids are able to write or send pictures. And as they get older, they can improve their writing skills. But I think it's a great skill and it's something to look forward to. How often do kids get actual mail in the mail these days?
Right. And do you realize they don't teach how to address an envelope in school anymore? I found this out when my high schooler was writing. I had my kids write the thank you letters for their graduation presents and stuff like that. And they're not taught, like, where do you put the return address? Where do you do that? All that old school stuff.
That's funny. My kids were actually taught that in high school.
They were? Mm-hmm. Well, they went to private school. That's why.
They had to send letters as part of a class. So I remember, especially my son was always trying to think of people to send his letters to. And so he, rather than write what he was supposed to write, all these things he was doing, he would write things like, I'm writing this letter because I have to for class. Hope you had a good day. Bye. And they were supposed to, of course.
Did they also teach cursive? Because they don't do that anymore in the schools.
Well, the kids I'm around, it depends on the school. Some do and some don't. Which is crazy to me because people still use cursive. So,
well, they say if at some point the Generation X wants to take over the world again, you just put everything in cursive and drive only stick shifts and we'd be dominating.
Oh, that's funny. I have not heard that.
Yeah. Speaking of older kids, though, a couple of tips of ways to stay connected if you're afar is watch TV together. And I know that there are some TV shows where people literally just get together from different areas, in different homes or whatever. They watch a show together and then they just comment on it on the phone on FaceTime or whatever.
That's a great tip. I do that with my daughter. We watch the same show and we kind of stay at the same part and then we can discuss it when we're together. So that is a great tip for older children. You find out what they're interested in and what they enjoy, and it's something to discuss with them that you know that they are truly interested in.
Yeah. And just like, hey, if you can do Thursday night at 8:00, or whatever.
Oh,
let's
I didn't
get
know you
together.
meant like actually watch
like live.
Oh, I thought you meant like watch the same show and then discuss it at a later time.
Well, you could do that if you can't get it in the same time. Right. But the shows I'm talking about, I think they're on Bravo, is where they watch these reality TV shows together. Simultaneously, and then comment on it together on the phone.
Oh, that's funny. Well, especially with FaceTime now, that would be an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and it keeps the grandparents connected. Now, of course, I think the grandparents would probably have to try to be a little more modern, and I'm going to say hip, which isn't a young term,
I'm going to say for sure they'd have to be watching what the grandchildren want to watch.
Right, right. The other thing, again, for the older kids, we had talked about this a little bit with things that kids like to do with their grandparents, is cook together, again, on FaceTime. And maybe there's a recipe. Your teenage grandchildren maybe will cook with you. You can talk them through it, or you guys follow the same recipe, and then you eat a meal together over FaceTime.
Well, you could actually Instacart the ingredients to them as well.
There you go.
If they weren't with parents.
If they weren't with parents.
If they were like in college or a little bit older, you could certainly do that in this day and age, which I always forget. And a fun little thing on a birthday celebration one time, a friend had told me her son's favorite meal was whatever it was. And so she had DoorDashed the exact meal to herself and him. So they enjoyed the meal, eating the same thing, but across the country from each other.
Perfect.
So I thought that was really a cute idea too.
Yeah, those are great ideas. You know, some of them I had to look up, but it sounds like some of them are real experiences that have worked so far. So take advantage of lessons from other people.
I know we were talking about older grandchildren, but I do have an idea for younger grandchildren, and it will be my fabulous find this week, Angela. In anticipation that my daughter and son-in-law and little granddaughter will be moving, I was trying to find ways to stay connected like we've been talking about in this episode. And I found an app that was recommended by a friend called Zoog. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's Zoog. And it's an app for grandparents or other family members. And the grandparent or the other person can record stories, they can record songs. It's divided by different age groups, and it has all these little funny graphics that they put on you, almost like I guess it's a filter, like a Snapchat filter almost, that I can see would be super amusing to younger kids. And it's your voice. So the grandchild is seeing your face, hearing your voice, either reading a story or singing the song. And I thought it was a super cute way to stay connected. And it's something that the parent can have on their phone and show the grandchild whenever they wanted to.
I loved it when you showed me the example of, you know, it had your face and then you were singing to your little grandchild and you were in a princess costume. Like it put you in a princess costume. So you were singing like Snow White or something. It was great. I loved it.
It's so funny, but I can see it would be very entertaining for younger kids. And I think it's hearing the voice, seeing your facial expressions, and doing something fun would be something that they would stay entertained with and enjoy.
Yeah. And I had mentioned on the last episode or one of the last episodes that I can't wait for my grandson to get a little older, and maybe he's going to be into superheroes or stuff like that. So like every week you could be a new superhero and read the story in that voice or in their costume.
So fun. I didn't even think about
like you could do themes.
My voices. Exactly. I have heard people talk about the Tony box too, and I don't have one, but I am definitely going to look into it. So if anyone has one, let me know. Everyone I've heard loves them.
What is that?
It's like a little plastic box, and you put little figurines on it. I think the child does to read a story, and grandparents or other family members can pre-record different stories. So they put Eeyore's little figurine on it, and it reads a story about Winnie the Pooh and Eeyore or princesses or whatever it can be. But same idea. It has your voice reading the story. You just don't have all the visual effects of the app that I was telling you about.
Well, I'm going to look it up. And I'll post that on the website too, in addition to your fabulous find. So if people want to check it out, they can.
Yeah. And if anyone has used one, I would love to hear if it really is fun and if it's one of those things that you just use once and don't touch again, or if it's something that children really enjoy and continually use a lot. Because I am considering getting one of those as well.
Well, I think we have a few great ideas for grandparents that are afar about, ensuring that we all, as grandparents don't get jealous of each other. Because as you're right, I think during the episode with Laura Young Shahada, you had mentioned that the more love our grandkids can get, the better. And so we shouldn't be competing or anything like that. Let's just give those grandbabies as much love and attention as we can.
Absolutely. And if we as grandmothers feel the jealousy coming up, I think we just remind ourselves that the more exposure to love our grandkids have, the better off they're going to be. And sometimes it does take some juggling over the holidays or different celebrations, but I think communication is key. And the earlier you can communicate your availability or find out the availability of the grandchild and your children, the better. Plan ahead.
Well, Sharon, thanks for another great episode. Hopefully our listeners have learned a lot. I know I did, and I'm going to try some of those tips coming up in the next holiday when I have to share the love with my grandbaby with the other grandparents.
And I would love any tips from any listeners that are long distance grandparenting, because I see that coming up in my future, and I'm trying to plan ahead as much as possible so I have all kinds of things set up that I feel like I can stay connected with my granddaughter.
Well, thanks everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode and look forward to the next one.
Have a great week. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the podcast so we can continue to grow our community. And follow us on Instagram at Working Grandmas Podcast, on Facebook at The Grand Balance, a Working Grandmas Podcast, and join our LinkedIn group, Working Grandmas. You can also email us at info@workinggrandmas.com or message us through any of our social media platforms.